through life service. We're going to talk about how clustering could be a way for you to recover and to achieve better performance. And then if you're interested, tell you what you can do next. It'd be best if questions are reserved for the end. I think we're recording, is that right, Claire, so that this can be shared?
Yes, we started recording just into your first slide, Clive, so yes, we are.
Great, and yeah, we're happy to share the slides afterwards. So what is this opportunity? Well, the three of us are involved in ADS's Through Life Service Group. It used to be known as the MRO and Logistics Group, and a couple of years ago had a bit of a sort of rebirth and refocus as Through Life Service. And we define that as the combination of services required to keep an aircraft available, airworthy, and economically optimal. So right from its delivery to its disposal. And in that group, you know, we all agreed we weren't confident of where the UK aerospace market was in through life service. So the three of us did some research on the market, and we'll have a look at that in a bit. And we found that to create a business winning proposition in through life service, there's often the need to pull together different operational capabilities, commercial capabilities, and some very new capabilities. And that working collaboratively could deliver that. When moving into through life service, that companies can secure longer and more profitable contracts, they get access to a larger market to sell into, and because they're sharing costs across organizations, they can achieve some synergy. Also, that clustering can give them access to funding to support that venture. So I said we did some market research. Well, what did the market say? Well, first of all, I'll introduce you to two things: the team that did the research and then a model that we used to base that research on. So we're three businesses collaborating together with expertise in strategy. That will be from me. From digital, that's from Peter Maloney in Adventure, and business transformation with Graham Gabb at Axel & Co. And with the support of ADS, we surveyed a broad range of aerospace and defence through life service suppliers in the UK. We used face-to-face interviews and an online questionnaire. And we based that around a well-known stages model for growing revenue and margin. And on the left, stage one is a traditional product or service delivery, where a customer rings you up, sends you an email, clicks a button on your website, orders something, and you deliver it, and they pay for it. The next stage up, output-based single service, is where you're providing a single service but on something like a guaranteed turnaround time. Developing on from that, we have integrated operational services. So this could be something like direct line feed, which is not served just by manufacturing. You've got to do other things to make that happen. And maintenance with a guaranteed turnaround time, including spares and repair. And then stage four, availability contracting. You're probably all familiar with the term dry lease or power by the hour, where the operator is paying per hour of use and the supplier retains the ownership of the asset and makes it available to that operator. And then the ultimate stage, stage 5, is where the contract is actually around not the asset, but the capability that the asset provides. A good example of this is the UK's search and rescue capability, where the operator provides a guaranteed turnaround time, basically to rescuing people all over the UK. And there's a lot of research that shows as one moves up this stages model, that organisations typically see a sales growth of around 20. And this is for two reasons. They're giving a broader offering, so it's of greater value to the customer, so they're charging more, and also they're gaining market share because it's a differentiated offering. And also they're seeing growth in margin, typically 15 to 35% growth for that company, and achieving margins in excess of 10%. They're achieving lower costs because they're more motivated to reduce costs. If you think about the far right hand of the stages model, then any breakage to the equipment, any repair is a cost to the supplier, so they're going to want to reduce that. So costs reduce for the supplier and the customer in the end. But it does require investment. One needs to invest in the capability, especially digital and data management, to make it work. So to summarize, as companies move up the stages model, they get closer to their customers, become more intimate with them, and their processes and people get more integrated into those of the customer. And the payback is longer term contracts, increased revenue, lower costs, and improved margins. So, what's the state of play in the UK aerospace through life service market? This is the headlines from the research that we did. Companies are moving up the stages model and seeing revenue growth and longer contracts as a result of that. But they're not seeing the margin growth that we would expect with that that's being seen in other sectors. And the reason is that their development of their capabilities and technology are not aligned with their movement up the business stages model. As they move up, the business environment becomes more complex and customers are flowing down risk onto those suppliers. That risk is being shared, but margins are not reflecting that additional risk, and they should do. And this is because risk is being bottlenecked in those suppliers. It's not being passed down the supply chain. We found that the smaller companies are not expecting technology to have a high impact, which is in great conflict with what the larger companies are thinking. A third of the small companies see data collaboration as important, but very few of them actually recognize the importance of remote asset monitoring to actually collect the data and predictive analytics to actually gain insight into the data and unlock its value. So let's have a look a bit more deeply at what's going on. Well, here we can see a chart of movement up that stages model. So the blue bar represents the percentage of their business that's in that stage now, and the orange bar in 3 years' time. And the red or green bar show the change over time. Now we can see over that 3 years, people are expecting an increase in the higher stages of the model. They expect more of their revenue to come from those. And as a consequence, less to come from stage one of the model. Now, I've just told you that should be accompanied by an increase in margin, but more than half expect their margins to stay the same, and less than a third expect it to increase. Now, why is this? Well, we're seeing that in aerospace, there's insufficient investment in the capability to deliver the benefit of the value. In the traditional product proposition or stage one of the model, customer centricity is always important, and managing the contracts with those customers. Supply chain management is obviously important so that you can deliver, and also the contract management with those suppliers. But through the transition into a more service-based proposition, there are new capabilities required. Those same capabilities are still required, but in addition, risk management, intellectual property management, and data collaboration, both upward with the client and downward with the supply base. And somewhere in the middle, there's probably some management of software design and build. So this is showing the capability portfolio that we found. And you can see that the classic product proposition capabilities are well developed. Ironically, just about everyone said, you know, customer centricity was a differentiator for them. If everybody's got it, it's not a differentiator. You know, this chart is showing that, you know, the more red, the more say they're in this territory, and going to the right is higher capability.
Hi, Phil.
Now,
Yeah, I'm just listening to Clive. He's doing a weapon.
can we all mute our microphones, please?
Yeah.
So
It's okay, it's not really.
the new skills and capabilities that we can see are required for more service-based propositions are actually not on everybody's radar. So this is giving them a problem and actually capturing the value of those services. And also we found collaboration is key. With service-based contracts, collaboration gets to be a much bigger part of those contracts, and 72% of our respondents said they expect to see collaboration as an increasing content in their contracts. So in conclusion of the research, the stages model shows that growth opportunity is there for longer term contracts, revenue and margin growth, but it requires new thinking, a portfolio approach to capability, and matching that capability as one moves up the model. To avoid bottlenecking risk that one takes on from the client, there needs to be attention paid to risk management, supply chain management, and management of IP and data. Data and predictive analytics are increasingly vital for all sizes of firms and wherever you are in the supply chain. And that collaboration will be a greater part of contracts and actually can contribute to solving some of these problems. With a group of people gathered together, that gives you a greater opportunity to achieve the right capability portfolio, to avoid the bottlenecking and sharing the burden of any investment in data and predictive analysis. So this is why we see clustering as a means of accessing recovery. It will be a good idea even in normal times, but even more so now. And we're offering a program to get you from where you are today to a clustered approach. So the first step that we're proposing is a workshop that explores what capabilities the group has and what might be needed. Understand where the opportunity lies for your combined capabilities and start to build an approach. Then we validate that thinking with a 6-week rapid execution, which will bring out the operating model, the business case and the value proposition, and explore the opportunities for funding that collaboration. Then with the chosen partners, build the capabilities and refine those models, the operating model, the business case and the value proposition, and prepare to actually go to market and then execute in the market. And out to that cluster will end up with a good value proposition, who's it for, where the value lies in it and how to communicate that, and what's the client journey on that proposition. The operating model, so what capabilities are needed to deliver that proposition, what insight do you need to support that capability, and the data that actually gives you that insight, the technology that you need to enable it, and who's going to operate it. The business case, it's got to float, so how does it generate income? What are the key KPIs for the business and for the client? how much is it going to cost to run, and the KPIs for the operations and what's it sensitive to. So if you do find this of interest, to unlock those benefits, then here's what you should do next. Express your interest to myself or to Sharon at Northwest Aerospace Alliance. But in the meantime, in any case, you can download the full findings of the research here with that link. A bit much for you to copy and type in. So yeah, that will be available in the slides afterwards. And that's all I'd like to say now. And are there any questions? And the three of us will answer them as best as we can.
Thank you, Clive. We don't have any questions in chat at the moment, but if anyone wants to raise a question, please do so.
Hi, Sharon, and thank you, Clive. It's Gordon Smith. Just a thought in terms of your research. I suppose the starting point for getting together is actually a perceived need. So did your research cover how many of your respondents were dissatisfied with their current business performance? And then for those that were dissatisfied, how many of those actually said they wanted to change and actually were frustrated in doing that?
We actually found that they had that will. Many of them had that will to develop and move up the stages model, but hadn't put in place the capability that allowed them to benefit from it. So they're perceiving the need from their customers, and our market research is showing that even more now that the need from the customers is greater. If you think about the position of airlines at the moment, in a pretty bad financial state, and they're quite desperate to convert their capital assets, which are aircraft and piles of spares, into operation expenses, so that they're only actually paying for those assets when they're flying. So there's an even greater need for this offering at the moment. Does that answer the question, Gordon?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the your basic research, I suppose just going on to what you said about the airlines, I guess Rolls-Royce are a good example of Power by the Hour and their recent experience with the introducing the Trent onto the 787, and I guess how well they'll survive with that program is how well they've estimated what possible problems they might have in their risk management contingency, and then how they manage that through. And I guess going back to your point about the tools that are required to go up that step, it's fundamentally it's actually understanding what problems you might have, and therefore putting a contingency in, either a financial contingency, and then converting that into the collaboration and bringing people who are experts to manage that risk away for you, which I guess is the incentive for collaboration.
Yeah, I think in any business venture, to consider the risk to it is terribly important. And one of the things we've got in there is understanding sensitivities. Now, the last time that Sharon and I actually met face to face was in early March at Burnley Football Club.
Yes.
And my presentation was about scenario planning, and I basically said there are a lot of unpredictable events that will happen that are going to cause you problems. Some may be positive, but you should be planning for those events now. Even not knowing what they are, you can actually prepare yourself for them. There was nobody laughed, but the general feeling around the room was, come on, aerospace just keeps growing at 4 to 5% every year. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
So yeah, that scenario planning and being aware of those sensitivities is a terribly important element of it. And I would say, Peter and Graham, if you want to chip in, please do.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, sorry, it's Graham Gabb here. I was just going to mention about going back to that example of, say, Rolls-Royce. And I know from my days with BAE Systems, it's about creating and maintaining the levels of capability, not only in your own company, but actually in the supply base, especially if you're flowing that risk down, and making sure that you're not bottlenecking that risk. And often the capabilities are not technical. They're actually business capabilities like data collaboration, contract management, commercial management, risk management, intellectual property management. And intellectual property doesn't mean just IP embedded in your product. It's actually about how you do stuff. So it's knowledge management, those sort of things, and how you value it. And you often find, especially in aerospace and especially in the non-OEM sector, that there's a lot of lack of capability in those commercial capabilities. And you see that through their results. Lots of growth, lots and lots of growth, in fact, 30–40% growth, but little or no requisite margin that follows that. And that was, sorry, that's my point on that one. I don't know if that helped.
Thank you, Graham. We have a question, Clive, from Chris Holt, asking what level of investment might be expected in digital tools?
I'm going to ask Peter to pick that one up.
Thanks, Clive. Chris, that's kind of a piece of string type response, so forgive me at the start. I'll end with some kind of hard numbers, or actually I might start with some hard numbers. That people are looking now to invest, depending on where you're starting on the curve, up to 10% in digital technology, 10% of revenue. So a big chunk and a big commitment. So now come a series of caveats. Any investment is worthless unless you have the ability to turn it into business value. And I often see people who are dissatisfied with their investment because they haven't got, again, the buzzword of this, I guess, is the capabilities to manage that and how to change the organization to exploit the value that the technology can bring. And this harks back, some of you may be familiar with that Made Smarter review from 2017 now. And that said, for SMEs particularly, the challenge is time, absolute time commitment from senior leaders in an organization, experienced knowledge and the ability to find a partner who can take them on their journey. So you've got all those things that make it difficult. And I think there's some of the findings that Clive alluded to, pointing to where there's just an abject lack of knowledge of the potential some of these technologies can bring. So you've got that context. And that's why I think collaboration around that area, I think it is potentially a way forward, especially around there's a spectrum of collaboration models, but I think things around shared services are a way that smaller organizations could pool resources and access resources in a collaborative way. So instead of not just paying for a capability once, but actually the management time and setting it up and making sure it's busy. Because sometimes these things aren't busy the whole time, but if you can pool that demand, you can probably enjoy an economy of scale. And that, if you're paying for it a fraction of the time you would if you owned it yourself, then obviously the barrier for ROI drops and therefore you feel more confident with being able to drive a return. So that's kind of trying to give some perspective on how much you should be spending. As regards a roadmap, get on the cloud. Microsoft's cloud is all pervasive, and interestingly, they're trying to move everyone to the cloud because they can see the benefits it brings not just to their business but also to their customers, and they start to move into using your data more intelligently, because as the research pointed, the organisations further up the supply chain are going to start demanding and imposing data services on their supply chain. And I think unless you're familiar and indeed confident with those kinds of discussions, you will be a victim rather than being able to enjoy the benefits. Chris, does that kind of give some guidelines rather than specific answers?
Yeah, I appreciate it's not a definitive answer that you can give, but certainly that helps in terms of you know, what the current thinking might be, particularly the point about primes, OEMs, etc., imposing cloud services on the supply chain, because I think that's something that isn't always thought about up front. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chris. David Bailey has a question. David?
Thank you, Sharon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We heard last week from Paul Burns, International Programme Director for BAE Systems, how the Through Life Service Programme for F-35 is significantly larger than the production programme. So clearly there are significant opportunities. In my time with Northwest Aerospace Alliance and the work that I'm doing now in terms of assessing organisations using, for example, our own aerospace supply chain excellence model, now using the SC21 competitiveness and growth model. What I often see within the supply chain is lots of reasons, understanding about why companies should collaborate with their customers, much less so about why they should collaborate with their suppliers. How might you change that?
Yeah, that's a good point, David. Yeah, and yeah, the point about Tempest or F-35 is well made. That any aircraft, including a commercial aircraft, it's the service, the money spent on service over its life is a multiple of what that aircraft actually sold for in the first place.
Yeah.
And collaboration is often sought from the highest level customer, and often it can be true collaboration, but often it's more will take advantage of you, I'm afraid. The way to give a competitive offering that gives the supplier more leverage in the marketplace is through that grouping together. And I think why it doesn't happen so much is because, you know, it isn't straightforward. It does take some effort. The key ingredient in there is always trust. So it's going to take some time for a group of companies to find that working level between them. So and that's a lot of the reason for this program, that we recognise the challenges to the individual companies, and we're trying to make that easier for them to get from, we might be able to work together, to actually, yes, we've got a collaboration that is actually now delivering something that individually we couldn't possibly deliver. And it's an offering that is of benefit to the client. Now, for example, one tier one company that I had a long conversation with, they're basically getting, they're collaborating with their customer, and it's not the right form of collaboration that they would like. Basically their margins are being driven down. And they're carrying all the risk, and they're not passing any of that down their supply chain. But if their supply chain were to collaborate together and to give an offering to that tier one company that actually shared some of that risk, in fact, they would all be able to access a better margin and be a more competitive offering in the marketplace. Does that address that, David?
I think it addresses the reason why. I'm still not sure on the how. How do you overcome that sort of those trust issues within the supply chain, I guess. I mean, often a lot of these organisations have felt that their competitors with companies, or the suppliers might go directly to their customers, and what just seems to be difficult to create that collaboration. I mean, we've seen good examples, I think, in Ireland of this type of collaboration, but yet to really see it in England at the moment.
The key is the focus on the benefits that you can access together that you cannot access individually. I once had the good fortune to be sat next to one of the joint managing directors of CFM at dinner. Somebody made a terrible mistake with the seating plan, but it was a real, I saw it as a real opportunity. And I said to him, you know, you are two fierce competitors working together to deliver one product without competing against each other. How on earth does that work? And his response was, well, yeah, there have been moments when it's been a bit strained, but we start every meeting, every discussion with a reminder of what we get out of this by being in it together.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, that was a few years ago, that conversation, and stayed with me ever since.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that whole thing about really understanding where do we collaborate and where do we compete, and being clear about it is certainly one route to this. I think Chris has got a comment as well.
Yeah, it's in response to two things. One is trust. How do we build that trust to collaborate? But where do we start in terms of collaborating? Experience in the past has been, you look at a new project, a new customer, bring a collaboration together and go after that opportunity. But maybe it's just in hindsight thought that perhaps working on together, parties coming together to look at an existing customer, an existing opportunity that one of the companies has, working on that might enable the partners to build up that trust. And it might be that, you know, each of them has to give something to the other to engender that relationship. But along the way, they're developing trust, understanding of how they work and operate before they then launch after a brand new opportunity.
The best illustration I've seen of how collaboration can work well is the prisoner's dilemma game. And if you're not familiar with it, I recommend you Google it after this webinar. So basically, two people are in the police cells, unable to communicate with each other, and an officer goes into one and says, you know, for the crime you two did together, you're looking at 7 years. But if you dob your mate in, you know, I'll give you less. And they're having the same conversation with both prisoners. And this game was modelled with computer programs that were pitted against each other, and the rules of the game, to win the game, one had to spend the least amount of time in jail. And the program that won had a very simple set of rules. It trusted first, and if it was dobbed in, it copied that behaviour. And very quickly, as it played against every other program, they ended up collaborating and ended up spending less time in jail. It's a very interesting case. So in business, that means, you know, to start out trusting, and you've both got to have skin in the game. You've both got to have something to gain by working together, and something that you will lose if you don't.
Can I share some perspective, Clive? I think the survey points to, and it's work that we three are now a collaborative engagement. It's interesting observing our behaviours. But the research was done at about this time last year, so pre-COVID, and it pointed to, give a bit of context to Gordon's question as well, it pointed to the direction the sector's moving in. So more service orientated, more reliance on the incumbent partner to deliver what was asked, and actually to anticipate needs and to deliver more. So that kind of drives this is what drives the risk behaviour of, you know, can I, as the prime supplier or the incumbent supplier, actually, to use a less divisive language, can I do everything that's been expected of me? Chances are no, but the behaviour is actually, I don't want to say no, so I'm going to accept it. And I think that's what the executive interviews back this up to a certain extent. That's what drives this margin erosion, because and the risk profile, because people are just accepting things. Now, if you roll forward to where we are now, the size of the pie is much smaller. And if you are incumbent, you are going to do everything to retain that relationship. So I think the dynamics and the burning platform, as it was called in a conversation we're having this week, we had earlier on in the week, the burning platform is pretty evident. So if you are the incumbent supplier, you can choose to absorb and to say yes, 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 for fear of losing your customer. Now, unless you engage with your peers in the supply chain, and indeed your primary suppliers, you're going to embark on risk, and you're not actually going to grow that relationship. And you've got to factor in as well that one of the slides Clive showed, that collaboration, the customer base is expecting collaboration. So you've kind of got a number of dynamics that are pointing to collaboration is the answer. So you have to get on it. And then that points to your question, David, I think, which is how do you actually start? And there is, you know, the model that Clive alluded to, you know, trust first, repent later. So ask for permission, not forgiveness, isn't it? Start working trust. You know, how would you work? It kind of models your own behaviours. I don't trust you because I'm untrustworthy. You know, not a good model. So enter it in a positive frame of mind. Agree the prenuptials beforehand. So as you know what to do if somebody does, you know, offend, I guess. But the practical thing, and we've got this proposition working. We've got about 7 or 8 companies that are now coming together in a cluster. And we think the journey to building trust and building value is to have a strong view of where we want to end up, which is a collaborative sharing and creation of new capabilities, whether that's done through a new entity or one of the existing entities takes it forward as the flagship and the entry to the market, you know, to create those customer journeys, as we allude to in the capability. But a stepping stone along the way is going to be, well, actually, how do you, what are the existing capabilities that you need to look at some kind of shared service capability model? And we think we're kind of, you know, trying to work through what does that look like. But if you think, you know, conceptually, that's a low risk way of accessing a capability. You may already have it. It may be something that you've wanted and just not really got round to it. But if a number of you are pooling together, you can access that capability, understand how the other organisations work, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. And as that grows, the confidence grows and the trust grows. That allows you then to step forward. And again, interesting with these companies that we are working with, there are some there that are fierce competitors, and their initial thing was, it's quite interesting on the early calls that we had and the early workshops that we had, they wouldn't talk if the other one was talking. But I think they've come to realise that actually there is synergy, and if they do work together, respecting, I think it was David, you said, you know, understanding exactly where you will compete and understand exactly where you will collaborate. They're starting to see the value of collaboration. So they're building trust within their own culture that then is starting to flow out into the collaboration. So not easy, but I think the circumstances and the situations we are in with the market, because the market's, you know, there's not enough to go around to eat what we ate last year. We're going to have to think smartly around how we help each other out and try and retain what we have on the table ourselves.
Okay, thank you. No more questions at the moment. Anything from anyone? Okay. Thank you very much, Clive. Hello.
Sorry, it's Chris.
Okay, sorry, Chris. Go on.
I hadn't realised that I'd not unmuted. There is one more question. Clive mentioned access to funding. Where is the source of that funding? How is that accessed? Is it NATEP? Is it through Make UK? What are the means for access to funding?
I think to some extent that will depend on the location of any cluster. You know, we're currently working in one of the devolved administrations on a cluster, and the government is very supportive of what we're doing, and it looks like funding will come direct from the government of that territory. I think it depends on the region, and we would explore that if there was interest in getting together. And I think that's something, you know, we'd have to do hand in hand with Northwest Aerospace Alliance.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Clive. Oh, we've now got Gordon. Okay. Sorry, he's asking me a question, whether this could be a P2P cohort, but I guess that's something we could speak about separately, Clive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Have you got anything else, Clive?
No, just to say thank you very much, everybody. It was a great discussion. Really enjoyed that.
Okay, thanks everyone.